Let's talk about the lovable working class. Moreover, let's talk about why when it comes to classism it always seems to be lower class versus upper class. Are we really that confined to our social circles? And how does the representation of working class influence our perception on class relationships? A lot of the time in media, working class people are depicted as these humble, quirky characters with enough real problems like low income, bad housing, disease that make them down to earth and more human. At their forefront, these characters' lives are determined by their betters, whether this be a boss, the government, or a supplied enemy to the character's cause. This is the case of the upper-class man, often imbued with a sense of financial hunger, entitlement, and always getting their way at the expense of our relatable, down-on-their-luck character. This war between classes is heavily explored in Charles Dickens's classic Hard Times, which I'll be contrasting with the more modern example Crackerjack, which was directed by Paul Moloney. Like many of his other books, Dickens's Hard Times follows multiple characters throughout the story, imbuing the novel with a sense of community and culture without showcasing this through a central character. Set in the industrial Coketown, the novel follows the lives of the Gradgrind family, Sissy Jupe, Stephen Blackpool, Hosea Bounderby, and others. The novel is a direct comment on the working condition of England during the Victorian period and uses the camaraderie of the working class citizens to drive home the moral message that what you give is what you get. Although Hard Times focuses on multiple characters, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to use Stephen Blackpool as our returning protagonist just to make things a little bit simpler. On the other hand, we have Crackerjack, which for starters is a movie instead of a novel, and it's set in the early 2000s Australia. Despite the texts having completely different forms, they converge on the same culture and community of their relevant working classes. The film follows lower-class telemarketer Jack Simpson, who has scored a reliable parking spot by being an official member of Cityside Bowling Club, despite never taking part in the sport. When the club becomes in dire need of financial help, they enlist Jack's help to save the club from the money-hungry Bernie Fowler, who is set on turning the club into pokey heaven. The story uses this premise to showcase the mateship culture of Australia, particularly in the representation of characters such as Stan and Nance, who provide Jack with mentoring throughout the film. The movie showcases an example of the lower class underdog triumph over the upper class entitlement and financial manipulation of others. Both texts begin with an introduction to the environment in which our characters live, and in doing so imbue them with the aforementioned real problem. Jack is formally introduced to us in a near miss with another car amidst the commotion of the traffic, and his low-classness is defined through the contrast of the man in the other car. The man is older, well-dressed, in arguably a better car than Jack, and listening to classical music. When we are later introduced to the Cityside Bowling Club, we learn that the club is in dire financial state, following the line of real problemhood. In these introductions, the characters are shown through a stereotypical lens, that their appearances signify their class status. However, in contrast to Stephen's quiet nature, Jack's aggressive and antisocial behaviour upholds this idea. Both texts begin to work towards the sense of claustrophobic and tight-knitted working conditions, which incites that both of our working class characters are always surrounded by a poorly environmental aesthetic. In each text, we find a central theme of lower class versus upper class. In the case of Hard Times, we have Stephen Blackpool versus Mr. Bounderby, and in Crackerjack, we have Jack Simpson versus Ernie Fowler. The chapter where Stephen Blackpool is fired for not revealing which of his co-workers are members of the union is even titled Men and Masters, to further showcase this class division. In Stephen's determination to not give up his fellow classmen, Dickens attributes this to the rugged earnestness of his place and character, deepened perhaps by a consciousness that he was faithful to his class under all their mistrust. Mr. Bounderby, contrastingly, is described at the beginning of the book as a rich man, banker, manufacturer, and what-not, and the bully of humility. In the conversation between them, their accents become a prominent tool with which to further showcase their divide, as Stephen's accent becomes unreadable while Mr. Bounderby continues to speak with more enunciation. In Crackerjack, it is not Jack's actual character aspects that allows the Cityside Bowling Club to save themselves, but a combination of teamwork and blackmail that finally gets Ernie Fowler off their backs and succeed in financial freedom. Although Jack agrees to compete for the Cityside Club, their team's success comes with the death of Stan, one of the older members who has mentored Jack throughout the movie. His death becomes another hardship for Jack and the other members of the bowling club, and is then used by Ernie Fowler to try and swing the results of the match. As Jack re-bowls for Stan, journalist Nance shows Ernie a photo of him violating his restraining order at Cityside Bowling Club, ultimately tying his hands and forcing him to give Cityside their well-deserved cash prize. In both texts, there is a sense of the individual upperclassman versus the many lower-classmen, and a punctuating sense that the lower-class community and culture becomes more intrinsically valuable than the monetary gain of the upperclassmen. In examining these texts, we can see that the attitude of us versus them continues to prevail, even into the 21st century. Both Hard Times and Crackerjack highlight barriers imposed by socioeconomic status, but emphasize the value of community and moral integrity in overcoming the indifference of the upper-class man. Both of these texts ask us if the possibility to break free from the confines of our social circles could foster a more inclusive shared humanity, or if these circles are necessary for connection and community in post-industrial society.